So when we switch over to a bitmap layer, you can see we lose some of our tools in the toolbar. But over in the tool options for the brush tool, we've actually got more options. First of all, we have a lot more varied options for brush presets. And we've got 3 sliders here for the max size, the flow, which is meant to replicate the amount of ink or paint flowing out of the brush when you press it, and then opacity is the max opacity that a single brush stroke can be. Try adjusting the flow and opacity and look at the preview to get a sense of what the difference is. Then if we click the arrow to see the extended properties, you can see we get a ton more options. On the tip tab, you've got a ton of tip shapes, and there's sliders for the max and min size, sliders for roundness and angle, hardness, spacing, and you can even add randomness to the brush. Then on the Transparency tab, we have separate sliders for the opacity of the brush. And then you can enable Dual Tip mode on the Dual Tip tab. This means the first tip setting will define sort of the outer edge of the brush, but then the dual tip interacts with it to make the texture inside the stroke. And then, like with the vector brush, we can enable paper type to add even more texture to the stroke. And also like with the vector brushes, you can either save these settings by updating the current preset or creating a new one. And you can export your brush presets just like before. If you want just your bitmap brushes, just uncheck the boxes for the vector tools. The eraser tool has the same set of customization options as the brush, though it will have its own set of presets in the preset palette. Think of the eraser tool as a brush tool that paints with transparent pixels. And down here for the shape tools, we have our same rectangle, ellipse, and line tools, only now they will draw their lines with one of the bitmap brush presets. So if you set it to draw a filled shape, the interior will just be flat and not have the texture of your brush. Now let's talk about the selection tool. If you use the selection tool on a bitmap layer, it's just going to make one big selection of whatever area of the canvas you have painted in. You can also transform it, and you have a set of operations over in the tool properties that you can perform on the selection. We also have the same ability to select drawings on multiple panels, either with this button to select all layers with the same name as this one in the other panels in this shot, or by using Command-Shift to select specific panels and making a selection that way. Beware though that since we're dealing with bitmaps, we're resolution dependent. So the more you scale and transform, the more the artwork will gradually get pixelated and fuzzy. So ideally, you want to draw at the right size to begin with. Now let's look at the cutter tool. It basically works just like it did on vector layers. It lets you cut a section of your drawing away and make an independent selection of it. Now let's look at the paint bucket tool. In principle, it works the same way as the vector version did, but we have these additional settings to help us deal with fuzzy edges. I'll draw a shape with one of the brush presets. If we try to fill it in, you see we get this white halo where the fill stopped at the edge of the brush stroke. That's because the pixels in the center where I clicked are perfectly transparent, so as soon as it reaches pixels that are different enough from the interior, it interprets that as the edge of the region. To correct for that, we can increase its tolerance for pixels with varying alpha values, so different transparency, Or if you're dealing with different colors, you can increase the color tolerance to extend the fill area a little farther. You can also just increase the maximum overlap to force the fill area to expand and overlap its border by a certain amount. So we've gone through a lot of tools, but honestly, you're probably just going to be using a couple basic drawing tools 90% of the time, and only occasionally need to dip into these other features. What you want to do is hone in on what tools and techniques work for you and your style, and let you draw most efficiently. Then, just like we did in Photoshop, you can take those tools and make a palette of tool presets. We'll look at how to do that in the next video. I'll see you there.